I found out my boyfriend was drugging me every night. Last month, I noticed that something is off with my boyfriend. He was being too nice recently, like cleaning up his dirty dishes and being attentive to my needs. I would have thought this was a good thing if only I haven't caught him waking up in the middle of the night and leaving the house. I tried waiting for him to come back, but I fell asleep after some time, and the next thing I knew, he was back in bed with me. That morning, it clicked on me like I found all the pieces to the puzzle. That's why he was acting so nice. And recently, I would admit that we haven't had some sex, and I thought he just wasn't in the mood. Now I know why. He was having an affair. I was furious and heartbroken. I told my best friend, Natalie, all about it, and she was as heartbroken as me. She kept asking if I was sure about it. I mean, what other explanation it could be? He'll be gone the whole night, and he'll be back in the morning. What did he do? Buy some milk? I said to her that I have a plan. I'm gonna wake up before he does and catch him red-handed. My best friend just nodded and said that was a good idea. That night, my boyfriend prepared a nice meal for me, something he hadn't before, and I was mildly surprised. I pretended not to know anything about his infidelity, so our conversation went normally. However, when we finally settled back in bed, I had fallen asleep almost instantaneously. My sleep was so good that I wasn't able to wake up at midnight. I was disappointed with myself. How could I have slept on it? What's weird was in the following nights, that kept happening to me. I couldn't wake up in the middle of the night. I also tried staying up all night, but at some point, I would fall asleep. That is very unusual since I had been a night shift employee before. I didn't have this kind of trouble of suddenly falling asleep. Sometimes, I couldn't even remember what happened last night. My crazy brain thought maybe my BF was drugging me, putting something to make me sleep through the night. That's the only possible explanation I could think of. But then I asked myself, how did he know about my plan? My heart sank as I realized the answer to my question. Natalie, my best friend. I couldn't believe it. Why would she betray me? Is she my BF's lover? At this point, I was intoxicated with anger. I skipped dinner and only drank water from tap. I made sure none of my BF's drugs would reach me. My boyfriend was even persistent that I should eat or at least drink some milk. To me, that was a confirmation that he was indeed drugging me. I was about to confront him about his infidelity right then and there, but I felt a blunt force hit me at the back of my head and I was out. When I came to, I was tied up in bed and my BF was watching me at the corner of our bedroom. He was biting his lips and was pale as a sheet. What is this? I asked him. His eyes lit up when he saw me awake. He then ran to our living room and called for someone. My heart sank as I saw who it was. It was Natalie. I yelled immediately after seeing her. It was you! How fucking dare you! I shouted at her. Natalie asked me to calm down. It's not what you think. She kept repeating. I'm gonna kill you both when I get out of here. I kept trying to free myself, but to no avail. They used some of the thickest rope I've seen. Babe, listen to me, my boyfriend said. I'm not cheating on you. And certainly, Natalie and I have no romantic relationship. I get out of bed every night because I need to stay safe. Stay safe? I asked. Stay safe from what? From you, he answered quickly. What, Jace, it's near 3. We should get out of here. Natalie whispered. My boyfriend then took out a paint bucket and painted my hands and legs with red paint. I squirmed and yelled as he did it in a hurry. All the while, I was thinking, who is this person? Is this really my boyfriend? How could he do all of this to me? As if he could hear my thoughts, he kissed my forehead and said, You'll understand everything tomorrow, I promise. Before I could reply, he and Natalie ran away and I was all alone in our bedroom. I kept screaming for help, but I knew it was pointless. My mind was racing as fast as my heartbeat. My lungs felt like it was shrinking as I breathed for air. No. 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 How could they do this to me? Why are they doing this? I kept trying to free myself, but I got exhausted at some point and lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was still in bed. But I noticed that the ropes that bound me last night were now roughly severed and my wrist burned like hell. As I looked around the room, I understood Jace. The floor, the walls, and the ceiling as well, were full of red handprints. My handprints.
What is the rudest thing someone said to you right after you had a baby? My husband was born with problems with his legs and hands. I've been told it was caused by medication. My mother-in-law was prescribed while pregnant. He needed multiple surgeries to try to correct them. After being married a couple of years, we told my in-laws we were expecting. My mother-in-law would talk about the wonderful medication she was on while pregnant. It prevented her from having miscarriages. She told me that I should ask my doctor for it. My doctor told me it was called Day. He explained that it would be what caused my husband's birth defects. It was not mother-in-law's fault. They didn't know the side effects and she was only doing what she and her doctor thought best. My mother-in-law kept saying I needed these pills. I explained they were off the market since the late 60s and caused birth defects. She explained her pills weren't those pills. She wouldn't have taken them. They were bad. She said my son's birth defects weren't caused by those pills. They were just something that happened. She made it sound like it was my husband's birth defects weren't caused by those pills. They were just something that happened. She made it sound like it was my husband's choice. My doctor explained the pills were sold under several names and no other drugs were sold for that purpose at that time, and my husband had a side effect. He put in my chart my baby's father had prenatal day exposure. My baby is born, and my in-laws came to visit in the hospital. It was in the 80s and the baby was in the nursery. Mother-in-law starts talking about my daughter's legs. She asked, "Are they deformed? Did you check her hands? Did you specifically tell the doctor to check them?" At this point, I'm literally shaking. The nurse heard my mother-in-law talking loudly and came and checked on me and took my blood pressure. The nurse suggested that my in-laws cut the visit short. My mother-in-law announced she wasn't leaving until the doctor checked the baby's legs and fingers. My father-in-law and the nurse ushered mother-in-law out. When mother-in-law left, the nurse came back in and checked on my blood pressure and told me my mother-in-law would not be allowed back in to visit. When I went home, mother-in-law showed up. She mentioned she wasn't to blame for my blood pressure problem, and I better have had the baby checked. I think every special or happy occasion mother-in-law always had something to say to make it upsetting. Odd, when my sister-in-law got pregnant, she didn't mention the pills to her. My sister's husband kissed me and touched my body. My sister and I have always been close, inseparable. Well, we grew up and she got married. Then things changed. Her husband would always give me weird compliments and say inappropriate comments regarding my body. I mentioned it to her on multiple occasions and she said I was over-exaggerating it all, and that's just how he is. I decided I would just keep my distance for a while because I was so uncomfortable, and it was that bad, but she wasn't taking me seriously no matter what I said. Well, a few months later, my sister's gender reveal came along, so of course I wouldn't miss that. As soon as I got there and he laid eyes on me, he got so excited. He bounced right out of his seat next to my sister to run to me for a hug with arms wide. I immediately stepped aside and declined. The whole family saw the situation, and my sister glared at me and didn't say 2 words to me the first 30 minutes I was there. She got over that, and we had a great time. Towards the end of the shower, most people were leaving, but I stayed behind to help my pregnant sister clean up a bit. She then sent me upstairs to get her fluffy slides, as her feet were hurting. Little did I know at the time, that was the moment that would forever change our relationship. I went to get the shoes, and her husband was in the bedroom. As I entered, he made his usual distasteful comments that I ignored. Well, I guess he didn't like that anymore, so as I was just about to walk out the door, he rushed to the door and closed it, forcing his hands all over my body and kissing me. It all happened so fast. I was so disgusted and shocked but managed to punch him and get out the door and ran to get my sister. I explained everything to her thinking she would be on my side, as I had been telling her about him for months, almost a year. Boy, was I wrong. As I'm telling her what happened, he come downstairs screaming and came up to her saying I wanted him to touch me, and when he didn't want to, I got mad. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but my sister did. She started yelling at me saying I was a puss, that I'll never have her man, and more. By this time, the remaining guests had gathered around. The betrayal I felt at the moment was unbelievable. I just blurted out and told my sister to flick herself, and that she's a horrible person for allowing him to do this to me. I even said she's a bad mom if she allows her child to be around him, as he's an assaulter. I left and haven't since spoken to her, but she's all on Facebook posting like I'm the bad person, saying I caused her stress. He's an assaulter. I left and haven't since spoken to her, but she's all on Facebook posting like I'm the bad person, saying I caused her stress. So basically, am I the a-hole for telling her what she needed to hear? I caught my wife letting our male neighbor rub lotion on her pregnant stomach. This literally happened this morning. I'm posting it here and hoping to vent and maybe get some perspective because I've been extremely upset all day and can't process this productively. My wife is 8 months pregnant with our child. We live next to another married couple who are in their late 30s. I don't like the guy. I found him to be invasive and the weird type of friendly that almost seems to be prying and clingy. I'm not sure if that's clouding my judgment here or if this validated my beliefs about him. I left for work, decided on the way there. I just wasn't feeling it and called off. I stopped for breakfast before heading home to surprise my wife, 40 minutes tops. I get home, enter from the back door, and here's my wife and my neighbor sitting in our living room on the couch. She's turned toward him, fully clothed, but with her shirt pulled up over her very pregnant stomach while he, facing her, is rubbing lotion on her stomach with both hands. They both froze, before my wife asked how come I was back and then said, his name, stopped by to borrow the toolbox while I was moisturizing, and wanted to know if he could feel the baby, so I said, okay. I told him to get out before I put him out, and he left immediately. I tried to stay calm and talk to her and get the whole story. Neighbor's wife is apparently infertile. First I heard of it, which is amazing considering the guy never shuts up about his personal woes, and he wanted to feel the baby. That's her story, and she's sticking to it. That's not good enough for me. My thought process is there's a big difference between feeling a baby for 10 seconds and coming into our home and rubbing lotion on my wife's stomach. If it was some close friend of ours, I might understand, but I dislike the guy, and my wife has never expressed any sort of closeness to him aside from passing pleasantries, and she's not the type to let anyone she isn't close to put their hands on her. So in the span on a day, the guy goes from being a distant acquaintance of hers at best to her deciding to invite him in and let him rub her. I also find it convenient that he showed up that early, right after I went to work, very shortly after his own wife also left for work, and he's never came over asking to borrow anything of mine before, yet 9:30-ish in the morning, and he urgently needs a toolbox. I don't believe my wife. This is the first time I trust in her hasn't been strong enough. I don't believe her story because it makes no sense. When I told her I'd be mentioning this to his wife, she was adamant I don't believe my wife. This is the first time my trust in her hasn't been strong enough. I don't believe her story because it makes no sense. When I told her I'd be mentioning this to his wife, she was adamant I don't, as not to make more of it than it is. If it was innocent, what more is there to make? And even if nothing more is going on, I'm not okay with what I seen. I'm not okay with him rubbing my unborn child in my home without me there. I know it's her body and her choice, but I'm not okay with this. It'd be one thing to feel the baby kick, but he was sitting reclined comfortably on our sofa, rubbing a lotion on her with both leaned into their private conversation. I'm trying really hard to figure out how to express the fact I don't believe her story without causing stress that'd be dangerous for her or our baby. I don't want to pick a fight with her at this stage of her pregnancy, but at the same time my mind is spinning and I'm not cool with what happened. Any advice would be appreciated. I met my now husband in a failed foursome our significant others made us have. 6 years ago, I was married to someone I thought was the love of my life. We always promised to never stray, and he seemed to be very against cheating. However, when I was pregnant, our intimacy life decreased, and I noticed he started paying attention more to his phone. My husband came home one day to me and told me he wanted to swing with this woman at college and her boyfriend. I was shocked and heartbroken. I told him why, and if he didn't want me anymore, he could have just said so. He said it wasn't it at all, he just wanted an adventure. Turns out later, he just wanted to be with that new lady. Her fetish is to have her boyfriend watch. I agreed because I was pathetic and I loved my husband, plus we had a 6-month-old baby at home. We met this other couple, and I sensed that the guy wasn't into it at all. We met 2 times before the actual day. On the second time, the boyfriend and I confessed that we weren't really into this. We texted the whole next day and came to the conclusion that we might as well have fun. When the actual day came, the boyfriend and I confessed that we weren't really into this. We texted the whole next day and came to the conclusion that we might as well have fun. When the actual day came, the boyfriend and I spent more time on each other, and basically we forgot about our significant others, until the girlfriend started yelling at us to stop because this is not how it's supposed to happen. To be honest, I had no idea how things were supposed to happen. I was just trying my best, plus her and my husband probably just wanted an excuse to sleep together. My husband wasn't happy either, and he started accusing me of cheating. I asked for divorce there and then. Have you ever asked for divorce naked in a foursome? Next day the boyfriend asked me out and I said yes. We resumed what we started the previous day, and it was electric. I have been with him ever since, married for 4 years. We try to avoid the "how did you guys meet" question. Sometimes we say through mutual friends. My father blamed my sister for my mother's death, and now that she calls me daddy, He regrets everything. Part 2. I then told her if she wanted she could call me Dad, and since then she's been calling me Daddy. My father ended up getting a girlfriend and began to change himself as he stopped drinking, got a better job, and even began to take over a majority of the bills other than the portion I agreed to pay to stay living here. He never really tried being a father to Belle. He did begin to eat breakfast with us, but that breakfast was spent in silence other than me and Belle talking. Fast forward to a few months ago on Belle's birthday. I had planned a party for her and invited her to preschool class. My father ended up attending as I guess his girlfriend thought it would be a good time to meet his daughter, as she was the one who looked excited to be here. Anyways, while she was opening gifts, I surprised her with one of those kids' electric cars. She screamed and hugged me, yelling how she loved me and called me Daddy. After the party and after the Belle was fast asleep, my father asked me what the hell happened. I was confused till he yelled, asking why his daughter was calling me Daddy. I asked him if he seriously didn't know why, and told him that I was the one who raised her. I bought her everything. I celebrated her first. I was the one who didn't abandon her. He was quiet and went to bed. Since then, he's tried to play father and talk to her, but he was a stranger to her. She was a sweet girl, so she entertained my father's conversation, but he could tell how awkward she felt, and it was clear it hurt him. Despite how selfish it is, I don't want their relationship to get better. After all, just as she saw me as her dad, I saw her as my daughter. I graduated college, and I'm looking for a better job so I can move Belle and I into our own home. I may be a bad person for enjoying my father's misery and regret realizing he ruined his chances in having a relationship with his daughter. But I'll never be as bad as him. You may like when your kid gets to that age and you no longer have any privacy, and regret realizing he ruined his chances in having a relationship with his daughter. But I'll never be as bad as him. You may like when your kid gets to that age, and you no longer have any privacy. What facts about Japan do foreigners not believe until they come to Japan? While I have lived in Japan for almost 3 years, and the below incidents were hard to believe when they occurred, we took a taxi very late at night after we missed the last train to reach our place. The total bill was about yen $20,000. But taxi driver took only about yen $16,000, saying that he took a wrong turn, and it has cost yen $4,000 excess bill, and he won't take that. My friend got his train pass made for yen 10,000, and lost it on the same day. It could have been used by anyone, but somebody returned it to Rail's personnel, and we got it back the next day when we inquired about it. While coming back in taxi from market to our place, we didn't have exact change to pay to driver, and driver also didn't have it. We asked him to stay for 5 minutes so that we could get it from somewhere. He felt so much guilt for causing us the inconvenience that he apologized to us and left without taking any money. On a Friday night, we came back from office at around 11 p.m. and were looking for some beer. We asked to a person who was standing at counter of a Starbucks company cafe. He was so much eager to help us that he came with us for around 200 meters, leaving his counter to his colleague, and made sure that we find a beer shop. While traveling in train on a Saturday night, there was a co-passenger girl who was so much drunk that she puked in the train itself. The other co-passengers provided her the tissues and a plastic bag, and despite being so drunk, the girl cleaned everything and apologized to everyone. While in Tokyo Disneyland, we asked a sweeper worker to take our snapshot photo. He kept his broom aside at some distance and took our snap. After we were done, some other group came and asked him to take their snap. We went ahead to see other attractions. After around 1 hour, we came back to same point and saw a queue at that point for getting a snap done from that sweeper. The person was happily and enthusiastically taking everyone's snap. So much humility, I can go on and on. Point and saw a queue at that point for getting a snap done from that sweeper. The person was happily and enthusiastically taking everyone's snap. So much humility. My father blamed my sister for my mother's death, and now that she calls me Daddy, he regrets everything. I'm a 24-year-old male, and the older brother to my 5-year-old sister. For privacy's sake, I'll refer to her as Belle for some background. My parents had me as teenagers. They were 15 and 16 at the time, and even as a kid I could always feel that they regretted having me. After I was born, both my mother and father were practically disowned by their families. My mother had to drop out of high school to take care of me, while my father worked 2 jobs just to provide, and even then they couldn't afford a home. They lived with my mother's older sister until I was 9, and my father got his GED and managed to get a better job and move us out. Despite the fact our living situation was better, it was clear to me that they believed their lives were ruined because of me. Whenever I misbehaved like any normal child, they'd use the fact that they gave up their lives for me and I still had the audacity to behave like this. And even when I never misbehaved, they never treated me with much love. I barely got to get new clothing. They'd get my clothes from Goodwill and practically refused to get me anything nice unless they had 2 birthdays, parties, meeting friends, and their wedding. My birthdays were always celebrated with a bare minimum. They'd get me a cupcake and a single gift, nothing that I wanted. Despite everything, I was still a child who just wanted their love. But as I grew older, I began to accept I wouldn't get it and made peace with that. I guess somewhere along the line, when my parents realized, I gave up on them. As throughout my teen years, they, mainly my mother, began to treat me better. But at that point, I wasn't the child who begged for their love anymore. I never received the love of my parents, and I wasn't asking for it anymore. Although I can't say I kept hating them. In fact, I began to feel neutral towards them. In my eyes, we were practically strangers. I never got to know them truly, as they raised me with the bare minimum, and never had any real conversations with me and never spent any quality time with me. They also knew nothing about me, so suddenly trying to play parents with me was awkward to say the least. When I was 18, my mother got pregnant, and I guess that was when they gave up on trying to fix things with me, as they could have a new child to start over with. They didn't treat me poorly again, but instead it felt like we were strangers living in the same home. When I turned 19, my mother gave birth to a girl, but due to some complications, she didn't end up surviving. This crushed my father. Not only did he begin to resent me for not being as sad as he was over her death. She was barely a mother to me, so there wasn't much to be sad over, but he also blamed his daughter for unaliving his wife. He was never home after the incident, and I was left taking care of my sister. I ended up having to take a break from college after the time I came home from my classes, to my sister screaming with hunger in an unchanged diaper while my father was out drinking. I took care of Belle full-time and called out my father multiple times, but he always got angry and ended the convo with him saying I could always leave Belle at the fire station. I eventually gave up on forcing him to be a father. Despite everything, I truly loved Belle. She was the sweetest and cutest kid. She was almost always smiley and surprisingly slept through the night. Once she was old enough, I enrolled her in daycare and continued my education while working night shifts. I always made sure to leave a good portion of afternoons empty so I could spend time with her. She always knew who her actual father was, and as she grew older, she began to try and spend time with him. I guess as she began to follow him around the house. Of course, that quickly ended after he blew up on her and she began to fear him. I realized she saw me as a parental figure despite the fact she knew I was her brother. When she was old enough for preschool, I found out she was telling people I was her father. I never mentioned it to her and just let it be until she gave her father's day card she made in preschool to me. As a surgeon, what is the scariest thing you've seen in the operating room? A 30-year-old man came to see me for unexplained visual loss in one eye. I thought there was a mass pushing against his left optic nerve and ordered an MRI. This demonstrated that the mass was in fact a large aneurysm of his carotid artery against the brain. The protocol was to send such cases to the vascular neurosurgeon who saw him the same day. He agreed on the diagnosis and ordered an angiogram to better show the aneurysm. Both the angiogram and surgery were set for the next morning. This was about 1987 and there was no way of fixing the aneurysm without open neurosurgery. We were lucky as Dr. T was world famous for his technical ability, and he was kind to allow me to come as his assistant. The skull was opened by the resident by drilling 4 holes that were then connected with an electric saw that had a ridge to protect the soft brain beneath. The large skull flap was removed, and the underlying dura, tough skin around the brain, cut and flapped back, exposing the brain. For the next hour, the chief resident pushed and manipulated the brain to one side, and then a ridge of bone had to be drilled down for better exposure. Then we had a clear view, the juncture of the carotid and ophthalmic arteries with a big, bulging arterial aneurysm coming straight up at us. Before touching this, Dr. T placed 2 cords around the carotids on both sides, just in case, he explained. Then, a silver aneurysm clip was slipped in behind the aneurysm and slowly released, allowing the 2 prongs to cinch closed over the neck of the aneurysm. Only I didn't get to see the last part. Suddenly the entire brain pan filled with blood. I was suctioning but couldn't keep up with the outpouring of blood. The resident ripped his suction tip off, and I followed suit, so we went with these hoses into the bloody opening, but we couldn't make any headway or even see the brain. Dr. T couldn't see a thing, and blood was spilling up and over the edges of the skull. A nurse started to read the falling blood pressures, 110/65, 90/50, 70/40, 55/0. Then the anesthesiologist said, "We've lost him." Blood pressure crashed to unmeasurable. The nurse was squeezing bags of blood into him, but couldn't keep up with what was pouring out. Now if this happens in the abdomen, you can press the bleeder or place clamps, but in the brain, you don't have those options. But cool as a cucumber, Dr. T stuck his hands below the surface of the blood and began feeling about. He tied off the carotids proximal to the bleed. Then suddenly our suction worked, and the blood pressure came up from 0. Dr. T examined the area and laughed. "There was a second aneurysm hiding behind the first one," he exclaimed. A second silver clip was placed. Then the carotid ligatures were removed. I turned to the anesthesiologist and said, "Were you scared?" "No," he said. "Just sad." He was dead and I saw no hope that we could get him back. Such a young man. 2 hours later, I related the story to the patient's wife. On follow-up, the patient did great. He even got his vision back. I have never seen such cold-blooded rapid action under fire. Dr. T didn't even take a second to swear. Afterwards, in the doctor's lounge, he smiled and said, "It's more fun when it goes like that. My husband's girl best friend is pregnant and she says it's his. So I met my husband, and we hit it off instantly. He was the man of my dreams. He took me on date nights and made sure I was loved and gave me big gifts every so often, telling me I was the only one for him. I believe this since we have been together for 4 years now, and I've never had any issues until he introduced his best friend, who we will call Laura for privacy reasons. I remember we had an argument because he didn't tell me about her for our whole relationship, and he had been sneaking to see her and hang out with her at parties when I was sleeping, believing that he was working overtime. I was hurt by this, and my first thought immediately went to infidelity. But I found all of their texts to be platonic after he willingly told me to look. I thought she was nice at first, since when I first met her she spoke to me politely and said how lucky I was for about a week, until there was a get-together. And my husband invited me along because it was her mother's anniversary, and her family loved my husband, as they had known each other since they were kids. I was okay with this and quite excited, since I wanted to make more female friends and have girls. Nights out to relieve my work stress since my job is difficult, and I make 6 figures. I should also mention my husband works in an office job that doesn't pay a lot, so I handle all of the house bills and chores while he is trying to get another job. I walked into the house with my husband, and she ran to him happily and immediately wrapped her whole body around his arm and dragged him off to the garden. He didn't even come to get me or anything after being dragged away, so I went to the kitchen to ask for a drink, where I was greeted by Laura's mother. She is a lovely person. We generally had a nice talk about our own lives, and she made sure I felt welcome. The whole gathering was mainly nothing special till it got to the dinner. I sat down next to my husband, and Laura walked up to me and asked me to move. I asked why, since the only other spot available was next to her uncle and mother, and since it was about her mother, wouldn't she want to sit next to her? Laura replied to the question with, "Because I want to sit next to him." I turned to my husband, who just nodded and told me to move as well, saying that I was being childish and making a scene. At this point, I generally felt my blood boiling. My fiancé wants to go on a romantic dinner with her boss. Part 2. I told her I might be a hole, but I'm not stupid. She told me over and over again he's married. He can't do anything that would affect his marriage. So you're being the stupid one that leads me to believe that even she understands the larger implications that are at play here. She locked herself in our bedroom and hasn't come out for at least an hour. She ended up going to the event and came back later on Sunday evening. She didn't speak to me all day Monday, and the last words I heard from her were Sunday night after she got home, as she slammed the door to our bedroom saying, "You're still controlling a whole and we're breaking up." Her nuclear bomb is always saying we're breaking up whenever she doesn't have the upper hand in an argument, so I didn't make much of it. And in reality, I was just relieved that she was home. And apparently nothing bad happened at the dinner. So like I said Monday, she didn't say a word to me. I was only able to get into our bedroom to get some clothes, and I couched it again Monday night. Whatever. She was mad. She was embarrassed that she didn't see it coming. She was angry at me. I figured I'd give her some space, so I did. Tuesday morning, I noticed she was getting ready for work. I couldn't keep my mouth shut anymore, and I incredulously asked her if she was really going back to that job. She said, "Why wouldn't I?" I told her because the owner of the company had done a month-long manipulation to get her into a three-way with his other little side piece. She said that I was an idiot. I was flabbergasted as she was stomping around the house, putting her shoes on, putting on her makeup and whatnot. I told her that if she shows up to that office today and doesn't quit or follow up with the state bar, he is going to know that she's okay with what happened, at least on the surface. Even if she doesn't have intimacy with him, he knows that she has a really high tolerance for his bullcrap, and he's going to keep working at her. I also told her that she has an MBA with a focus in HR. It shouldn't take an angry redneck auto mechanic to tell her this. Her last words to me were, "Yes, effing a hole. I am the professional, you aren't," and slammed the door. So Tuesday, I had no idea what I was going to do. I knew it myself. She just sat almost catatonic on the couch watching Big Bang Theory, which she hates. My assumption, she egged him, her, or both. She gave in to him. I have no proof of this, but after all the bull crap, after the quick change in her behavior, it's the only thing I can think happened. I was in a meeting with my boss, and I was talking to him about the news. He said, "I'm not going to be able to work with you, but I'm going to be able to work with you." I said, "I'm not going to be able to work with you, but I'm going to be able to work with," but after all the bull crap, after the quick change in her behavior, it's the only thing I can think happened. My fiancé wants to go on a romantic dinner with her boss. I have been with my fiancé for several years now. She recently graduated and got an amazing HR job with a pretty high-profile law firm. The guy who started the firm is known across as being an ambulance chaser, shyster, and scammer. Because very frankly, he's trying to portray that in his commercials. So right after New Year's, my wife came home and announced that lawyer dude is taking the whole staff out to celebrate on January 20th, because it was the firm's biggest year ever. This is the timeline. January 5th she tells me to keep. January 20th open because partners are invited. Cool, I can do that. January 8th, sorry, she was mistaken. It's just a work party. She tells me it's cool if I make other plans that night. No problem. January 13th. She lets it slip. It's not really a party for the whole office, just for the people the boss thinks were part of the success. I'm starting to get a little sussy-wussy here. January 14th. Miraculously, all the people going to dinner with the boss are under the age of 30 and female. Now alarm bells are really going off. January 18th. The list is down to 2 people, my wife and another new attorney. So if I'm hearing this correctly, the 2 people mainly responsible for this 20-year-old company's biggest year ever are both recent college grads, both female and both around 25. My fiancé says, "Aren't you proud of me?" A few days ago, the big day, boss texts her at like 11 a.m. and says, "Hey, since this is supposed to be a celebration, don't drive. I'll send a car service for you." Fiancé still doesn't smell anything fishy, so I ask her, just for my own edification, ask what he says. If she tells him that's a great offer, but my fiancé knows the restaurant and he can drive me. Boss replies back in second, "Sorry if I had to change restaurants at the last minute. I'll send the car." My fiancé looks at me, apparently without the screeching submarine clacks and illuminated lights that are going off. in my head and says, "See, it's all cool. I'll just take the car service." I'm freaking the F out. I told her that she can't go. She called me to control a hole. I told her that this whole thing is really shady, as F and I relayed out the timeline as evidence. She said that me hoarding evidence like this is an example of how I'm controlling a hole, and she wants to go to dinner now more than ever. As a teacher, what's the darkest thing you've heard a student say? He was 15 and more streetwise than I ever could imagine. He was always hyper-vigilant about his surroundings. He was brought to our area by a dedicated group that was trying to help young boys caught up in their neighborhood gangs. This boy had been on the street more than he had been in school, but he was so bright he could learn easily if he wanted. He didn't trust anyone, particularly me, an older female teacher that had no idea about the life he lived. Over time, though, we established a bond. He felt a little more at ease in my class, and we would chat after school as he waited for his ride home. One day he confided that his girlfriend was pregnant, but he would be unable to be there for the birth because there was a contract out on him in his old neighborhood. He also said that he'd never see the age of 18, so why try in school? That gave me chills. I was incredulous. He was only 15, how could that be? What could possibly have caused that? Was it bravado? He went on to say, "I'm not going to tell you the things I've done because you'd have to report them." I explained that just what he had confided I'd have to share as a mandated reporter, and he said he figured that. No problem. He also said that he was going to run away from the group home when the time was right and go to Texas where he had relatives. The leaders of the home were aware, and they tried to monitor his schedule very carefully. Soon after he found his opening and ran, he evidently made it to Texas. I was relieved that he was in a new environment, and I hoped that his future would be a positive one. Unfortunately, he was drawn to return to his home neighborhood when his girlfriend gave birth. His best friend suggested a walk around the block to take a break from the hospital atmosphere. A car pulled up, shots were fired, and he lay dead on the sidewalk. The friend, nowhere to be found. There was one brief paragraph in the paper about his death, and it was dismissive. It made me angry. He was only 15. I think about him often. I wonder about his girlfriend and their child. Will the cycle continue, or have they found a safer life? During labor and childbirth, was there anything that took you completely by surprise? I had been in labor for around 16 hours with no food and water. Whatever I ate, I threw up within a few minutes. When daughter came out of me after a lot of struggles with pushing and cutting her cord that was wrapped around her, I heaved a sigh of relief when she was taken out, and I was finally free of the pain. I laid there on the table for some time when I noticed there wasn't any movement around me. My daughter was crying her lungs out. I opened my eyes to see 3 nurses bent over my daughter. "Is everything all right?" I asked. "Wasn't a baby crying a good sign?" "Yes, you relax," said the nurse. I closed my eyes again. There was a whispering amongst the nurses again, so this time I asked, little tensed, "Please tell me, is everything all right?" "Your baby came out all hungry," and all the nurses laughed. "This is the 2nd dose of milk that we are giving her. She wants more. Never seen a just-born this hungry," said the nurse closest to her. Her which had a syringe of milk in her hand, and daughter was sucking it in with full force. Well, that's an exact copy of my husband I have in there. I had chuckled all surprised. When they wrapped her up all contented and gave her to me, she gave me the grumpiest look ever. Now I know what that look was for. "You think it's easy being hungry, Mom? Couldn't you have gotten this over soon? It's been that day, and today she can go on without play, TV, or even sleep. But food is her soul. Can't do without it. Just like her father." No wonder she smiled at him the moment he picked her up for the first time. She recognized her partner in crime. How can I stop my 16-year-old son from sneaking out every night to see his girlfriend? I'm effing pissed about my 16-year-old son sneaking out every goddamn night to see his girlfriend, and I don't know how to put a stop to it. It's become a effing pattern where he waits until my wife and I finish work at around 8 or 9 p.m., then he sneaks out through the back door like some kind of criminal. He manages to hide in the house until we fall asleep. We have an alarm system on our phones that should notify us if he leaves, but he waits until we're asleep so it won't trigger any alerts. Yesterday, my wife was napping on the couch when she heard a noise coming from outside the sliding glass door leading to our backyard. When she investigated, our neighbor Mr. Smith was there, but claimed his motion sensor light had gone off. Unbelievably, our son was hiding nearby trying not to be seen. When confronted, he tried playing it off like he thought my wife was still napping, even though the motion sensor light said otherwise. As a result of this incident, we've now activated an actual alarm on our phones that alerts us when he leaves or enters the house. But last night, when my wife arrived home from work at around 11 p.m., it's unclear whether our son snuck back into the house through his window, or if he waited inside until she went upstairs and then made his escape like some kind of sneaky janitor. Frustrated as hell with this situation, I called ADT, the company that manages our alarm system, and reported what's been going on, giving them all necessary details about frequency of these incidents, typical hours they occur, and vehicles involved, while emphasizing how urgent this is for us all. They assured me someone would come over tomorrow afternoon between 1 and 5 p.m. to address this issue. But considering all complicated circumstances, including potential costs associated with additional camera installations, I can't help but wonder if they'll actually show up as promised. I just hope someone will come soon enough so we can finally resolve this poop once and for all. Sister wants my wedding because it doesn't count as I'm gay. This is so unreal to me that a person has this much audacity, but apparently my sister does. IF28 met my soon-to-be wife. 35 Noah when she moved to my country for work. She was freshly divorced, but has a little girl who is 5 called Lena. Lena is the sweetest, and it's been wonderful getting to know her. Noah divorced her husband after realizing she was gay, and he ran for the hills, stating he didn't want anything to do with her or Lena in case she passes it on, whatever the F that means. I proposed it to Noah 10 months ago, as I know she'd be too nervous to. It wasn't extravagant. I just asked her over dinner with Lena's blessing. We've agreed we want it simple and intimate for the wedding. Her first wedding was big and she hated it. So just family and close friends. My parents have offered to give us some money to help towards it, even though we've reassured them it isn't going to be a big affair. But they wanted Lena to get a pretty flower girl dress and wanted to pay for my dress in whatever Noah will wear, probably a suit. Enter my entitled younger sister, Kate, 25, who acts like she and her boyfriend are engaged, but he's too scared to actually ask her. She's the golden child, spoiled and gets whatever she wishes. She's made some remarks about Noah already having a child and being a divorce, but I told her to lose the ignorance. Just because she decided to stay in our small hometown and not expand her personality doesn't mean she can say poop like that. Over dinner last night, she started whining about how I didn't need any money, and she didn't know why we were bothering with a wedding when Noah has done it all before. But has suddenly decided she's gay and wants to have another go at marriage with a woman. This is something Noah is insecure about, so I get protective of her. Kate went on to say that she could resume her first wedding dress and started cackling. Her boyfriend looked embarrassed and my parents told her to be quieter, but no one said anything else. My parents have come to me and said it would make sense to them if they give more money to my sister's wedding fund, as it will be her first and only wedding. Not even engaged yet. Totally ignoring the fact that I've never been married. I told them to keep all of their money, as it wasn't welcome if they were going to shame my wife and stepdaughter. We are perfectly able to fund it on our own. Edit, I didn't say it, as they've never been homophobic towards anyone or when I came out as bi. But I do wonder if a little part of them feel a straight wedding deserves more funding than a gay one. Since people are asking, Katie asked for the majority of what they'd offered me to be taken back and put away for her. So that's what they've said they will be doing. I never asked for the money in the first place. Also, Katie said, why did we even need a reception? If there wasn't going to be a bride and groom, why have a normal wedding? So yeah, she doesn't think a gay wedding should be as important. Today I effed up when I learned the language my girlfriend speaks when she gossips with her friends. My girlfriend is South African. Her native language is Afrikaans. I've been learning how to speak Afrikaans without my girlfriend knowing. I secretly applied for online courses that I've been using for over a year now. My plan was to surprise my girlfriend and her family with my American Afrikaans when I finally meet her parents in person for the first time, later this year. I never intended to eavesdrop or anything, but learning Afrikaans in secret accidentally exposed me to sensitive information that my girlfriend was sharing on the phone with her African-speaking friends from South Africa. It was gossip I was not supposed to understand, but eventually I did. This is what I've heard in the past few months. My girlfriend is planning to surprise me on my birthday by reuniting with her high school metal band and putting on a show for me. My girlfriend wants to tattoo the names of literally all the Harry Potter spells on her back, but she doesn't know how to tell me because she's afraid I'll talk her out of it. My girlfriend casually mentioned that one of the unexpected differences between her glasses and her contact lenses is that when she's on her knees looking up at me with her glasses on, my PP looks much bigger compared to what it looks like through her contact lenses, which is why she's keeping her glasses on during intimacy. Ouch. My girlfriend is convinced that my parents are swingers, because apparently there are always attractive couples hanging out at my mom and dad's house whenever we visit. My girlfriend secretly finished the entire series of Better Call Saul without me, even though we agreed to finish it together, so now she's pretending to have no idea how the show ends. My girlfriend is thinking about canceling the high school metal band reunion for my birthday, because she's no longer sure if it's appropriate to team up with two of her exes that are original members of the band. My girlfriend expects her dad not to like me. I would have preferred not. Knowing most of those things, to be honest, but there is no way for me to unlearn Afrikaans, so now I'm cursed with knowing too much, while having to pretend I know nothing. My husband's girl best friend is pregnant and she says it's his. I stood up and told my husband that I felt uncomfortable and that I needed to go to the bathroom and ask where it was. Laura told me that I left the table doing breathing exercises, trying to calm down. I ended up messaging my brother from the bathroom, and he said I was being jealous and that I was overreacting. So I agreed and went back to the table to sit next to Laura's mother. The whole time they were laughing, and it seemed that everything he said was funny to her, and she kept rubbing his back, touching his arms, and saying how strong he had gotten, and she would look at me smugly. The breaking point to all of this was when I put a bit of meat onto my plate, and she said, "Are you really going to eat all of that?" And I froze, an embarrassment, while my husband and her laughed. Her mother stood up for me, saying that was inappropriate and a treat guest with respect, but she ignored it. Laura is very pretty and slim and works out, so coming from her, it hurt a lot. I stood up from my chair and walked out the front door and called my dad. I told him to pick me up and that I'll explain why in the car. When I got in the car, I broke down and told him everything. He said I was most likely overreacting, but the situation was very odd, and that I'm welcome to stay with him for the time being. I thanked him and went back to our house. While I was getting comfortable, my phone flooded up with messages from my husband and Laura. I read the messages, and to my horror, my husband was saying I ruined the whole dinner, and that he was going to stay there for the night. I then read what Laura said, saying I had ruined her night because of my pick-me behavior. After doing research on that word, it only filled me up with more anger. My husband came home around 5 p.m. from Laura, and I immediately said leaving me and staying at another woman's house was disgusting. And he started shouting that I'm overreacting again, and that I need to go to counseling for my jealousy issues. For about a month everything was going okay again, apart from that my husband getting more distant and cold, and I could feel that our argument wedged a gap in our marriage until I got a message from Laura this morning, with a positive pregnancy result and a threat saying we should get divorced because it's my husband's. I don't know what to do, and I'm just venting because I feel awful, and I feel like I failed as a wife. You really said that? Get out. My girl asked that we open our relationship, and I just pointed her to the door. Was it too much? I strongly believe that in a monogamous relationship when someone asks to open it, well, it is because that person saw something else out there and is ready to try it, instead of working in the relationship. Basically is blindsiding her partner. So I have being with Fran, 36, over the last 2 years and a half, almost 2 as a couple. I thought that things were moving smoothly and was about to ask her to move in at the beginning of April. But lately she was acting rather distant. So I decided to wait a little and watch. I was cheated on the past. So I'm a little cautious with some signs out of nowhere. This last Friday she asked me to open the relationship. She gave me all her big speech, and when she ended her presentation I asked her if she has someone in mind, because it's not like we decided today and basically going out with other persons tomorrow. Basically I trick her in to tell me what I already knew, and yes, she has someone in mind, which means, to me, that either she already did it or she has all set up. So I got up, walk around the apartment while she was trying to sell that this could be good for both us and our relationship. By the time she ended talking, I hand her one of my sport bags with all her stuff in it and tell her to left the spare key over the table on her way out, that we are done and she knows why. Then I went to the couch and turned on the TV, just trying to look and save face. She was speechless for a while, about to cry. But before she couldn't say something, I told her that I didn't want to talk about anything and she should leave. As soon as she left, I felt like crap. So unworthy. Cried a little, and as of right now, I'm still mourning. My phone has gone almost nuclear with all the calls and texts I received from friends of both sides about my extreme reaction over her simple request. Don't know what she told them. So now I'm sitting wondering if I really went overboard, and at the same time fighting the urge to run back to her, because deep inside even knowing my feelings for her are still there. The trust is gone, and I'm not going to spend all my time watching her movements. Is not healthy. Maybe in time. Really don't know. Before anyone pointed out, yes, I know, my reaction is pure reflection of me, not what she did or was about to do or could do. So, did I go overboard? I lied about who my baby daddy is. Do I tell him the truth now? I, 26F, grew up in the Midwest but went to college in California. There I met and dated Jeff, 26M, for our final 2 undergraduate years. After graduation, I stayed in California to get my master's degree while Jeff entered the workforce. We were happy together and planned to marry after I got my master's. After I finished my schooling, Jeff got cold feet about getting married and eventually becoming a father. Abandonment issues from his bio dad leaving, so he broke up with me. Heartbroken feels like it would barely scratch the surface on how I felt. I had a great job in California, so I hoped Jeff would come to his senses and we'd get back together. We never did. He met Grace, 25F, and started dating her about 5 months after we broke up. I started planning on moving back to my home state once I realized it was actually over. Then he and Grace broke up at the beginning of this year. Jeff and I ended up sleeping together a few times while they were broken up. It was a very public breakup. No cheating involved. About a week after the last time we had intimacy, he told me that he and Grace were getting back together. He said he couldn't remain friends with me because he still had feelings for me, and he had to let them fade to be fair to Grace. His final words to me were to not call him unless I was literally dying and just wanting to say goodbye. I left California behind 3 weeks later. 2 weeks after I had returned home, I found out that I was pregnant. It's Jeff's. I wasn't going to be that girl that uses a pregnancy to get a man back, so I deleted all my social media accounts and made new ones that don't have my name attached to them. The only Cali people I added were trusted friends, who I knew either had no connection to Jeff or who were loyal to me and wouldn't tell him my new accounts. Early in my pregnancy, I made the mistake of checking out Jeff and Grace's respective profiles and saw that they refer to each other as Llama. And Jeff even had a picture of them captioned, saying he was going to marry that girl. That broke me all over again, and I have since blocked them both and decided I had to move on with my life. I'm now 6.5 months pregnant. Since moving back, I have bought my own house in my home state and have been busy building a nursery for my baby. I lied about who my baby daddy is. Do I tell him the truth now? I already love this little baby in my belly, and I feel 100% confident that I can raise and provide for him on my own, with minor help from my family. One of my best friends back in California was having an engagement party. I won't be able to attend the wedding as I'll be busy with a newborn when it happens, so I decided to fly out to see my friends and offer my congratulations to the couple before my life becomes baby-centric. I got into town on Thursday and honestly had a blast seeing all my friends yesterday, even though it's only been about 6 months since I last saw them. They were all respectful of my wishes, not to take pictures of me below the chest. They did post some pictures of me online, but From the angles, it just looks like I gained some weight on my face. Nothing that would give away my pregnancy. It's a couple days before my flight back home, and the friend that I'm staying with suggested we go to the store because she wanted to get a scrapbook for our engaged friend. So we went to the store, and as we were getting ready to leave, I saw Jeff's cousin Tanya, 22-ish, walk in. I talked to her several times at Jeff's family gatherings over the years, but we never really got along. She was always a bit too gossipy for me to like her. So of course she was the last person I wanted to see. The first thing she did was loudly announce that I was pregnant, as if everyone in the store couldn't tell, just by looking at me. Then she starts grilling me, asking if Jeff knows. I said no, and that he doesn't need to know as it's not his. That was a lie, obviously, but I didn't want to open a can of worms. Tanya then tells me with how big my belly is that I'm far along and asks how I could move on so quickly. I told her that Jeff and I broke up a long time ago. She responded saying that everyone knows we were still hooking up at the beginning of this year. I did not know that was common knowledge. I figured Jeff would have kept his mouth shut about that. Anyway, I lied and told her I already had a new boyfriend and was 5 months pregnant. She seemed to accept that and awkwardly congratulated me. My friend and I paid for her stuff and left immediately after that. I prayed that would be the end of it. Like I said, Tanya is a gossip, so of course she went and ran her mouth about seeing me pregnant just a few hours later. Now a bunch of my friends have messaged me saying that Jeff is blowing up their inboxes trying to reach me. None of them have told him my new number or social media, so he has no way of reaching me himself. My flight back home isn't for another 2 days, and I'm freaking out. Some of my friends say I should just tell him the truth now that he knows I'm pregnant. I still say I can get by pretending it's someone else's, and that I'm not far enough along for it to be his. I honestly just want to ignore him and go back home. However, I'm having some doubts that that's the right choice. I'm in a nightmarish divorce process because I need to protect my daughter from my spineless husband and his fanatical Pentecostal family. I'm currently locked in a battle with my soon-to-be ex-husband over our differences on how we both want our daughter to be raised. When my husband and I first started dating, I learned that he grew up in a very religious Pentecostal family. He shared stories about strange things he'd seen at tent revivals, people claiming they were healing others from demons, speaking in tongues, etc. He emphasized that he was not nearly as religious as his family. It seems like he's been downplaying his faith for years and misleading me. In our relationship, my husband often placated his Pentecostal family's desires, such as their push for me to convert and our wedding being a highly religious event. Post our daughter's birth, his parents' controlling nature escalated, expressing desires to homeschool her and questioning my capabilities as a mother. I noticed my husband was torn between our life and his parents' demands while still insisting he isn't religious, and it's to maintain the peace. After many discussions, we compromised by enrolling our daughter in a Pentecostal private school. I wanted to make sure I could enable open-minded thinking at home, and received my husband's assurance to prioritize our relationship and our daughter's best interest over appeasing his parents, and he agreed that we could change schools if needed. She was enrolled in this school for the last 2 years, and over that span of time, everything has gotten worse. Anytime I talk to him about my concerns, he deflects. She talked to me over this time about the concept of hell, and asked me if I thought her grandfather, my dad, who died about a year ago from esophageal cancer, was there. I witnessed her waving her arms slowly in the air, head bowed to the floor, moving and swaying to music when watching TV sometimes. About a month ago, before Easter break, I'd had enough. I took her out of the school without even telling my husband because he has absolutely no sense of urgency, and immediately shuts down the topic. When he got home, he was furious and screamed at me. He tried to tell me how much of a nightmare public schools can be and that one of the teachers at the private school, who is friends with his mother, would be telling her everything, etc. He stormed out to spend Easter weekend with his parents, leaving us in silence for nearly 2 weeks. What was the cringiest thing you did in your first relationship? Duke gave me a necklace with a little diamond family and a heart with our 2 hypothetical children who he had named James and Jasmine. I wore it for 2 days before I returned. I was 15. My mom cried. Same guy, we were getting into a heavy makeout session in my parents' basement when I looked up and saw my mom behind him. I was not wearing pants. He ran out the back door while I awkwardly dressed myself. My mom cried. Same guy, lost my B card to him and he had covered my parents' guest bedroom with rose petals and lit candles. Whipped cream was involved. I thought I had cleaned everything up but missed some whipped cream on the comforter which my mom thought was dried bodily fluid. A lot of it. "Guess what?" she cried. "Same guy, we were doing the deed in the shower at his parents' house and his mom came home unexpectedly. Had to come downstairs and explain why I was showering at their house. She called my mom, who cried, and then had a group meeting with both sets of parents telling us that we were moving too fast and talking about safe intimacy. Same guy, his dad, walked in while we were watching a movie and fooling around under a blanket. The dude very obviously keeps going while having a full-on conversation with his dad. His dad winked. Same guy. We were in my bedroom and my parents were supposedly at the lake. Car pulls up and he jumps out of my second-story bedroom window to avoid my dad, who searched the entire house for him afterwards. He couldn't play baseball that week and the coach, also my English teacher, was very mad at me. Same guy. We were doing the deed in the baseball field dugout late one night when a couple nonchalantly walked by, pretending they did not see us. Same guy. We were fooling around in the backseat of my car at a local park in the woods and had completely fogged up the windows when a man tapped on the door and told us to knock it off. Turns out it was my neighbor. Same guy. We broke up and for some reason my parents felt bad for him, so they let him in with flowers, and he slipped them petal by petal under my locked door for 2 hours while trying to convince me to get back together. All while my parents and his dad were sitting in the living room. Same guy. After he followed me around school for weeks, I had guys volunteer to guard me from him. He ended up leaving school over it. Same guy. I got married. We had broken up about 11 years prior at this point, and he texted me on my wedding night saying things like, "What if we had gotten married? We probably have James and Jasmine by now." I did not answer. I am still married 4 years later, and he still reaches out periodically. The girl that rejected me is now stalking me, and it's getting creepier every day. This all started about a month ago. There was this girl, let's call her Sarah, who had a huge crush on. We had some classes together in college, and even studied together sometimes. One day, I mustered up the courage to ask her out on a date, but she turned me down, something about not wanting to ruin our friendship. I was a bit hurt, but respected her decision and tried to move on. Everything seemed normal for the first week or so after that. But then, I started noticing Sarah everywhere. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe we had more common interests than I initially thought, like what are the chances, right? But as time went on, it became clear that this was more than just chance encounters. Sarah would be waiting outside my classes, claiming that she needed to talk to our mutual professor, a professor who is pretty close to me and I look up to. She would show up at my favorite coffee shop just minutes after I arrived. She even accidentally bumped into me at the grocery store multiple times. The creepiest part? Whenever we crossed paths, she would give me this intense stare that sent chills down my spine instead of talking to me about anything. I started getting paranoid and decided to confront her about it one day when she showed up at the library where I was studying alone. She acted surprised and denied everything, but there was something off about her reaction, like she was hiding something. Things got worse from there. One night, as I returned to my apartment after hanging out with friends, I noticed that my door was slightly ajar. My heart raced as I entered my home and discovered that someone had been inside. Nothing appeared to be stolen, but there were subtle signs of intrusion. Some of my belongings had been moved around or misplaced, as if whoever broke in didn't plan on stealing but rather trying to find something for me. Then came the messages. Random texts from unknown numbers containing vague threats and warnings. You should have given her a chance. She's not the one you should have rejected. She's watching you. These messages don't even make sense because if it's the person I'm thinking, then I wasn't the one rejected her. Anyways, I tried blocking the numbers, but that was pointless as new ones would always appear. So I changed my numbers and I even went to the police, but without any solid evidence or proof. They couldn't do much to help me as they suggested if the text is only evidence, then just change your phone number as someone can just be pranking you. However, I haven't told anyone about anything as I didn't want to look dumb because they will just say, it's chances. Now, every day is a constant state of unease and fear. I've tried changing my routine and avoiding places where I might run into her, but she still finds me. I can't shake the feeling that she's always watching me, looking in the shadows as cringy as that sounds. I'm not sure what she wants or why she's doing this, as I tried talking about this with her already. All I know is that it's getting creepier by the day, and I'm not sure how much more I can take. Has anyone else experienced something like this? Any advice on how to deal with a stalker who used to be a friend?